I would never think I'll write anything in the Reddit, but I need to share this story with someone. The night I found out the crib was still in its box, I remember standing in the middle of the nursery, half-painted walls smelling faintly of fresh eggshell white, holding a tiny pair of socks between my fingers. They were no bigger than the palm of my hand, a reminder that in less than a month, I'd be someone's father. The text came at 9:47 p.m. My phone buzzed twice on the dresser. At first, I thought it was one of my buddies asking if I'd finally finished assembling the stroller, but it wasn't. You should know what she's been doing when you're at work. No name, just a local number I didn't recognize. There was a photo attached, blurry, dimly lit, but unmistakable. Her, at a restaurant, leaning over the table toward a man I'd never seen before, her hand on his cheek. She wasn't just smiling, she was looking at him the way she used to look at me, before the morning sickness and the nursery plans and the long talks about diapers. My chest tightened so fast it felt like my ribs had been replaced with steel bands. I kept staring at the image, hoping it would blur into something else, anything else. But it stayed sharp. From the other room she called out, "Babe, can you bring me some water?" Her voice was soft, almost sleepy. I didn't answer right away. I was still deciding whether to walk into the living room with the phone in my hand or walk out the front door and never come back. I walked into the kitchen, the phone still in my hand. She was curled up on the couch, blanket over her legs, the glow of the TV flickering across her face. She looked so normal, so ours, that for a split second I thought maybe I'd imagined it. "Here's your water," I said, setting the glass on the coffee table. My voice sounded steady, which was strange, because inside I was nothing but noise. She smiled faintly and reached for it, her hand brushing mine. "Thanks, babe." That one word, babe, twisted in my stomach. I pulled my hand back and stood there. "I got a text." Her head tilted, confused. "Okay." I held out the phone, the photo glowing between us, from someone who thought I should know what you've been doing when I'm at work. She didn't take the phone, she just stared at it for a long moment, then leaned back against the cushions like the air had been punched out of her. "It's not what it looks like." God, I hate that phrase. It's the universal cheat code for people caught in the act, a way of pressing pause, hoping the other person won't hit play again. "Then tell me what it is," I said, my voice cracking now, the steel band in my chest pulling tighter. She darted her eyes to the side, then back to me. "It was one time, before you knew, before—" She placed her hand on her stomach, almost like a shield. "Before all of this got real." I felt my knees go weak. "Before all of this got real?" I repeated. "We'd been planning this baby for months. When exactly did it start being real for you?" Silence. The baby kicked then, not me, but her. I saw the slight shift under her blanket, and for some reason that made it worse. It was like the universe wanted to remind me that no matter what she had done, there was still a tiny heartbeat in that room that had nothing to do with betrayal. I sat down across from her, elbows on my knees, phone dangling loosely in my hand. I asked, "Do you love him?" Her eyes glistened, but she didn't answer right away. That pause told me more than any confession could. "All right, we'll slow it down and live in that messy, exhausting in-between where you're stuck between love, betrayal, and the weight of impending fatherhood." The days after felt like moving through wet cement. We didn't break up, we didn't make up, we just existed. The apartment became a waiting room we were both trapped in, counting down to a due date that felt like a ticking bombshell. Some mornings she'd wake before me, pad quietly to the kitchen and make coffee. She'd pour mine into the same mug she'd always used, the chipped one with the blue stripe, and set it by my side of the bed. It was almost worse than her ignoring me. That casual kindness felt like a performance for someone who no longer bought tickets to the show. At night, we barely touched. Not because of her belly, that had never been the problem, but because my mind kept replaying the image of her hand on his cheek, the same hand that used to rest on my chest when we fell asleep. I'd lie awake listening to her breathe, wondering if she ever thought about him while lying next to me. When people asked how we were doing, I lied. Good, just tired. That was the truth in a way. I was tired. Tired of pretending, tired of feeling like a husband in name only, tired of planning a future on a foundation that felt cracked down the middle. The worst was the baby shower. Family, friends, balloons, and cake. She stood beside me smiling for photos, one arm around me, the other on her belly. Every time someone said, "You're going to be such great parents," I felt the words lodge in my throat. Are we? I wondered. Or am I just a placeholder until she figures out who she really wants? At night, after everyone left, she told me the baby had been kicking more. She took my hand and placed it against her stomach. I felt the little thump, tiny, insistent, and for a moment I forgot about the betrayal. It was just us and him, this new life neither of us could take back. But then she looked at me in that way people do when they're trying to gauge if you're still angry. And I realized the truth. I wasn't angry, not exactly. I was afraid. Afraid of raising a child in a house where love felt like a memory. I want to tell about the birthdays. The call came just after midnight. Her voice was tight, almost trembling, but not from fear, from the first wave of contractions. The drive to the hospital was quiet, except for her shallow breathing and the rhythmic click of the turn signal. I kept my eyes on the road, hands gripping the wheel so tightly my knuckles looked bleached. Every red light felt personal, like the universe was testing me. In the delivery room, everything was a blur of white coats, beeping machines, and soft but urgent voices. I stood beside her, one hand on her shoulder, the other gripping the rail of the bed. She didn't look at me much, but when she did, it was with this wild, primal focus that made all our silent fights feel microscopic comparison. Hours passed. The room got warmer, sweat sticking to my neck. I kept handing her ice chips like it was the only thing keeping us tethered. And then, the sound. That first sharp cry. It cut through me in a way nothing else ever had. I didn't think about her, or him, or the photo on my phone. I just thought, my son is here. They placed him in her hands first. She looked down at him with a softness I hadn't seen in months. Then she turned to me, almost hesitant, and held him out. When I took him, he was impossibly small, warm, and heavier than I expected, not in weight, but in meaning. His tiny fingers curled around mine like they were claiming me, and in that moment I knew two things at once. I would protect him with my life, and I wasn't sure if that life would include her. I kissed the top of his head, breathing in that sweet new baby scent. She was watching me, her eyes wet, but I couldn't tell if it was joy or something else. When the nurse asked if we wanted a family photo, I said yes. Not because I believed in us again, but because I knew one day he'd look back at that picture and see that, at least in that moment, we were together. But under the smile, I felt it, the quiet certainty that the real labor was still ahead. Not hers, mine. The work of being a father while learning how to be a man who survived betrayal. The first night home was chaos wrapped in silence. The baby cried in short, sharp bursts like an alarm I couldn't snooze. I walked the floor with him in my arms, whispering nonsense, patting his tiny back. She slept for hours between feedings, exhaustion pulling her under hard. I didn't mind. I wanted the time alone with him. But even in the haze of sleeplessness, the weight of us pressed down. The hospital had felt like neutral ground, like we'd both been drafted into the same war and couldn't afford to fight each other. But at home, the old silences returned. She'd hand me the baby without looking me in the eyes. I'd ask how she was feeling and get one-word answers. 2 weeks in, we had our first real fight since the birth. It started small, something about how I folded the laundry, but it cracked open into the same argument we'd been avoiding. "Are we going to talk about it?" I asked, voice low so I wouldn't wake the baby. She stared at me, bouncing him gently in her arms. "What's there to talk about? You already know what happened." Knowing isn't the same as understanding, And I need to understand if I'm supposed to stay here. That got her attention. Her eyes narrowed. You'd leave? Now? With a newborn? I felt a surge of anger, not because of her question, but because she was making it sound like the betrayal was something I could just shelve for later, like unpaid bills. I'd never leave him, I said, nodding toward the baby. But you, I don't know anymore. We stood there in the dim living room, the baby's small hiccups the only sound between us. She looked like she wanted to say something, but didn't. She passed him to me and walked to the bedroom. That night, I sat in the recliner, with my son sleeping against my chest, staring at the shadows on the wall. I thought about how fatherhood wasn't going to save us, and maybe it never should have been expected to.
I realized then that love wasn't always the thing that kept people together. Sometimes it was obligation, sometimes fear, and sometimes the only thing holding you in place was a 7-pound reminder of the life you'd created, and the promise you refused to break to him, even if you already felt broken yourself. It happened on a Tuesday. No fight, no shouting, just a quiet click inside me, like a lock turning for the last time. She was feeding the baby in the rocking chair when I walked in. The lamp cast a soft amber glow over her face, and for a moment I saw the woman I'd fallen in love with. But then, just as quickly, I remembered the restaurant photo, the blurred edges of betrayal, the months of silent space between us. I sat on the edge of the bed and waited until she looked up. "I can't do this anymore," I said. Her hands stilled. The bottle paused mid-air. "What do you mean?" "I mean us," I said. "I'll be his father, every day, every way, but I can't be your partner. Not after everything." She didn't cry. She just stared at me, like she'd been expecting it. "You think this is what's best for him?" I looked at our son, tiny fingers curled around her shirt, eyes half closed in that milk-drunk way newborns get. "I think what's best for him is having parents who aren't pretending." The silence stretched out thick and heavy. She nodded once, almost imperceptibly, and turned her gaze back to him. That night I packed a bag. Not everything, just enough for a few days. I kissed my son's forehead, breathing in that same new baby scent I'd memorized in the hospital. "I'll see you tomorrow," I whispered, because I meant it. Walking out wasn't dramatic. No slammed doors, no neighbors peeking through blinds, just me stepping into the cold night with a bag over my shoulder and a promise in my chest that leaving her didn't mean leaving him. In the weeks that followed, I learned that absence has its own kind of ache. I'd sit in my half-furnished apartment, scrolling through photos of him, feeling both relieved and wrecked. But I also learned something else. Sometimes, the bravest thing you can do for your child is to walk away from the war zone before they learn to crawl through it. 2 years later. My son is running now, full speed, arms flailing like he's trying to take off. He laughs the same way he cries, loud, unfiltered, from the deepest part of himself. When I watch him, I sometimes wonder how something so pure came from something so broken. His mother and I speak in measured tones now. We pass him between us like a fragile package, careful not to jostle him with our history. We don't talk about the betrayal anymore. There's nothing to excavate. The bones have already been picked clean. Co-parenting is its own strange country. Some days we're allies, some days we're just two border guards handing over a passport. But we've learned the geography of our arrangement, the safe routes that avoid old landmines. I still remember the day I left, not with regret, but with clarity. I didn't leave because I stopped loving my son. I left because I wanted him to grow up knowing what love actually looks like, not the thin, tense version we were modeling. People ask if I've forgiven her. I tell them forgiveness isn't a gift you wrap up and hand over. It's a slow erosion of anger, a quiet acceptance that what's done is done. I don't know if we'll ever be friends, but I don't want her to be my enemy. The other night, my son climbed into my lap with a book. He can't read yet, but he pointed to the pictures and told me his own version of the story. I realized then that one day he might ask for the real one, about why his parents live in different houses. When that day comes, I'll tell him the truth, but not all of it. I'll tell him his father loved him enough to stay present, and his mother loved him enough to keep him safe. I won't tell him about the restaurant, the photo, the years of trust that crumbled overnight. Those are my scars, not his. Because fatherhood, I've learned, isn't about holding on to everything. Sometimes it's about knowing exactly what to let go.